data knows no emotion. It is what it is. And be able to take that analysis and use that to create something magical, for me, it's really what makes it really powerful. When you learn, you teach. Because when you teach, it actually reinforces what you have learned, and as you're teaching, people are growing, you're also improving yourself. If you're in the business of selling soap, for example, do you know how many soap brands that exist already in Nigeria? So there has to be something about your brand or your product that is different. The decisions people make is also as a result of the experiences or the culture where they exist. The worst mistake you can do in today's world is not to be informed.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stories and Journeys, where we explore the transformative power of learning, growth, and resilience. Join us as we uncover untold narratives and ignite curiosity. My name is Oluwatimilai Oyedeji. And joining us here today is an amazing person, someone with over a decade of experience within the marketing communication space across Africa. He currently sits as the Integrated Strategy Director for Central and West Africa at Publicis Group. He's not a person than the fantastic Emeka Obia. Hi, Emeka.
Hi, thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. We're super delighted to have you here as well.
I've been looking for an action. We're really happy to.
Yeah, thank you so much. You currently sit as the strategy director for Central and West Africa Publicis, and the journey started in 2015, with a consultancy firm, and you then moved from there, to work with other agencies. You had worked with TBW at some point, worked with Leo Bonnet, worked with Insight to Define itself, and now the strategy director. How's the journey been like for you?
I think for me, I'd say it's been a hell of a journey. It's been exciting, but also it's not been straightforward, I'd say. Right? It's been a combination of diverse experiences. It's been a combination of, different responsibilities. Some come to me, I don't even go to them, like, okay, what do I do now? All right. And it's just been on like that. Interestingly, one of the earlier parts of my journey was, I remember the time I was doing my NYSC, and that was in Akwa Ibom State. And then, how when you do your NYSC, you're about to leave, and then you're thinking, oh my God, how am I going to get it? Escape? Where do I go from here? And I came up with this brilliant idea, and I actually wrote a book at the time. It was a self-help book.
Really?
And it kind of blew up in the city, and I was very surprised, because I was like, I wanted to experiment something that I can add value, but also capture value myself at the same time. And that experience actually got me my first real gig, because I remember at the interview, of course I didn't have the experience, but the guy said something to me and said, if you have the discipline to sit, at your age and write a book, that means you can put a project together and see it through. And that's that experience actually sort of helped me kick off and then begin to learn and then build my experiences and learn more skills.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Well, what's the book about?
It's a self-help book. It's what people call a motivational book. Because at the time in the community where I was, there was a lot of I think in that community at the time, education was free. But you still have people who say things like, oh, but must I go to school and whatnot? And I was like, okay, what can I do to actually inspire young people and inspire a lot of these guys to actually see that, there's value in learning, there's value in improving yourself, there's value in growing yourself. And that was actually where that idea came, and it was really well received. And it was very interesting because I didn't expect that level of acceptance, especially because it's something that I hadn't really tried, before. Yeah, but it was a motivational book.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, you've had the opportunity to speak at various conferences and events. You're currently a faculty member at Pan Atlantic University. You also run mentorship program in schools in Netherlands, Mauritius as well. What keeps you going? What drives you?
I mean, I think for me is just waking up and the idea that that I actually exist to add value, if that makes sense. For me, it's just that ability to either look at a problem and try to find a solution around it, or just the ability to see something move from point A to point B, just being able to contribute, of course, using your skills, and also seeing that materialize, whether I'm dealing with my client or my mentorship or my training, as long as there's a movement, there's growth, as long as there's progress, for me, it makes a lot of sense. And he also talked about, my teaching and mentorship. I also enjoyed that as well, because for me, I believe that when you learn, you teach, because when you teach, it actually reinforces what you have learned, and as you're teaching, people are growing, you're also improving yourself. So it's just really about, being able to add meaningful and genuine value to people, to businesses, to organizations.
Interesting. There's somewhat that also goes into what you do currently, as director of strategy. When it comes to learning from people, just touching base with consumers, feeling their pulse. Currently, you sit across 25 different markets on the continent, and we're speaking earlier about how they're similar but yet diverse markets. What is that about for you? Why strategy? Why did you choose this path of strategy? Because at some point in your career, you had worked with a digital cloud-based service. You had then gone ahead to do so many fantastic work working with various brands across FMCG, tobacco, financial services, vertical. When you think about it now, what is strategy all about? For someone that is watching this and does not understand what it means to be a strategy director at such a top agency on the continent.
Yeah, thank you. I think, the word strategy is also, I'd like to say, it's sometimes the most abused word, because when you talk about strategy, everybody says strategy, right? If you're able to make something happen, or to cause something to take effect, you're a strategist. But again, just coming down to the industry, where we see it, and also for me, I would say, communication strategy or marketing strategy or advertising strategy, as we have it today, actually found, because it's a combination of the different experiences that I've had, right? At some point I used to work a lot in brand consulting, and at that time, for me, it was about people, right? I was doing a lot of people development work. I was doing a lot of trainings, or doing a lot of culture initiatives and things like that, improving organizational culture and things like that. At some point, I also moved into technology, where for me at the time, I was actually managing client relationships and also trying to make the business money. And then, moving also into advertising. But I would say at the very core is really about understanding people Okay. And also understanding business, right? Understanding people from the point of understanding the role that also culture plays. That congruence between people and the culture within which they live in, right? Because at the end of the day, the decisions people make is also as a result of the experiences or the culture where they exist. And, that goes a long way in, the food they eat, the places they go, the things they buy. The biggest question they ask is always, would someone like me behave in this way? Right?
Uh-huh.
And if you think about that, that informs all the decisions that you make, right? And it's really understanding that and understanding why your brand or your business exists, right? And then looking at how do you match that to this person who it's a product of their culture and is a product of their experience. And using that to drive that connection, that meaningful connection with them. Because at the end of the day, it's easy to say, your audiences or whatnot, but they're human beings, they're people. So really finding how to drive that connection in a way that, it's meaningful to them and you're actually creating meaningful value for them. Like, for the Kotler would say, he says it's really about creating tangible value for people and leaving them better off. No matter what services you're offering them or what products you're offering them, it has to, create a real impact or have a real impact on them. So essentially it's really understanding that and then deliberately every day trying to solve that business problem by helping them build connection with their audiences or with their people or with the different communities that they want to either introduce their services to or sell their products.
Interesting. Thank you so much for explaining that. While you were speaking, something came to mind. For businesses or brands to thrive, there's that bit of culture, that is critical, right? So I'm going to ask and say, what role do you think cultural transformation within a business play in ensuring that the business lives up to its expectation in terms of its essence and also in terms of its bottom line?
Yes, I think if you look at it, even if we look at Nigeria, for example, we see a lot of, short-termism happening, which is businesses are trying to, leverage promotions and whatnot to try to drive up sales or to try to make more money, which you can't really blame them. Of course, due to the pressures of the economy, inflation already now sits at about 32%.
Correct.
And you can imagine the impact that is having on businesses. But I think what not to miss out is also the long-term game, understanding that as a business you're on the long-term game and to create that balance, right, with the short-term and also the long-term equity brand building initiatives. And that is actually how you can become that brand that people just associate with, not solely based on price, but based on the value that they see that you're adding, not just to them, but also to the society as well. And I think that investment in building the brand is what we don't see a lot of businesses want to invest in, because now I just want to see the result. But if you look at some global brands, look at the most valuable brands in the world today and look at the top 10, you can see that those brands are brands who have over time built, invested in the brand. But also there's also a bit of short-termism going on, because they're also doing promotions, they're having limited edition product that they're launching every now and then. But just understanding that balance and ensuring that what your brand stands for is constantly being reinforced. it's really makes it different. And also connecting that to culture, also understanding the environment where that brand also sits is also important, right? The way that you bring that brand purpose to life in this environment might be different from the way that you bring it to life in another African community, for example, because of the differences in culture, or the differences in just how they behave and the things that they do, right? So it's really about that, balancing that investment, and also knowing that there's really no one size fits all approach anymore.
Interesting. I think that's beautiful. I want to double click on that and say, when you talk about culture, there's the market, cultural nuances, but there's also a place of culture within the business. The people. For brands that you've worked with, how have you been able to get them to see that internal culture, within their business or their brand as something that's important? And what role do you think that plays in ensuring that businesses thrive and are able to have longevity in terms of how they deliver their essence to consumers as well?
Yeah, I think internal culture is so critical, and sometimes some people don't realize how important that is. Back in the day, I've worked on brands where, when we started to look at the culture, to understand the culture, we found a lot of disconnect. We found a situation where the CEO's perspective, for example, is so different from the perspective of everyone on the leadership team. The perspective everyone on the leadership team has of the business is so different from the guys on the shop floor, right? And that exercise actually reflected a lot of the issues that they had come to us for. And having that internal alignment, of course, with your people, it's so crucial, because at the end of the day, your first brand ambassadors are actually your people, right? If your people understand your business, if people understand why they're there, if your people understand how what they're doing contributes to the overall success of the business, they would put in the work. They would realize that, okay, I understand what I'm doing here, and understand that I'm playing my part for a bigger goal, right? So really ensuring that you, as a business, you get that internal culture right is very critical to the way that you deliver the service. Because when I pick up a phone and call a business, and say, for example, the customer service person is rude to me, or a customer service person talks to me in a way that that does not make sense, right? That act is actually a reflection of that culture from bottom up, right? So it shows the importance of brand building, because brand building at the very core starts internally before it goes externally, right? Because first of all, you have to understand the brand, what the brand stands for, what your value proposition to your people internally is. And then building on that, you need to also get your people to become the brand ambassadors. You need to get your people to preach the message of the business, or to preach the message of the organization. And then you move to the next stage, where you then go to your publics or the other stakeholders, or whether your customers or whatnot, then need to feel, that brand in that way. But internal culture is really key. And in fact, I've done brand acculturation sessions where you have staff members of organizations cry and weep, and realize how much more a certain event has affected them, and how now they have a better understanding how their role is important to the business. Because people work in organizations where they don't even know what they're doing, or they don't even know if they're really adding value, or they don't even know how much the business values them, or they don't even know where the business is headed. So really getting that right plays a very critical role to how they deliver for the business, and also how, of course, in the long term, the business also makes money.
Sweet. Thank you so much for sharing that. Currently in the country and across the continent, small, medium enterprises drive, various economies across the continent. And certain persons or certain business owners will see branding as luxury, right? And like you said, short-termism, right? Some persons or some business owners will not prioritize branding. But what would be your recommendations? Your recommendations to such businesses, that are looking to have a watertight or an airtight, brand culture, that ties back to their essence and their brand purpose. What would be your recommendations to such businesses or entrepreneurs? Maybe like a self-start pack, that can help them, or are there recommendations that you'd rather prefer to such persons or entrepreneurs to ensure that while the CEO or the business owner has a vision, he also gets every other person to see that vision and then helps drive and propel the business to greatness?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, from a budget perspective, there's that on one hand, but I've also worked in an agency that actually had a specialized product for small and medium scale businesses. I think it's sometimes, even if you can't afford working with a big time agency, you can look for individual consultants, right? You can look for somebody to guide you through that process, and not necessarily having to hire an agency, put them on retainer, and then you're not able to pay, or you feel that's going to take a toll on your business. So I think it's really understanding, first of all, is knowing how important that is, especially when you're starting off, right? Because I mean, if you're in a business of selling soap, for example, do you know how many soap brands that exist already in Nigeria?
Yeah.
So there has to be something about your brand or your product that is different. So differentiation, distinction is key, especially at that early stage. And there are always ways that you can, get that service, right? You can look for, hot shops that are already offering packs or starter packs for SMEs. But you look for consultants, people who have, over time, built up that experience of working with similar businesses, and then get them to guide you. But I think it's really understanding that it's important. And yes, it could be seen as luxury, or it could even be seen as, okay, maybe I don't need this. But it's important because it helps clarify your business to you, and also helps clarify your promise to your consumer. Because when you make a promise to your consumer, to your customer, you're making a commitment. And when you make a commitment, you have to keep that commitment, right? And that's where you see that it trickles down. For you to keep this commitment, the question is, what must I do to ensure that I keep this promise that I'm making to this consumer, right? And then you look at all of the other connecting points. Your people, it means that your people must behave a certain way. It means your people must serve them in a certain way. It means that your people must engage with them in a certain way. It means that, your product or whatnot must appeal to them in this certain way. It means that you would have to create experiences for them in this certain way, right? So it really helps you really, really distinguish yourself from the clutter and help you build that niche. Even if you're a small product serving a small audience or initial audience, it helps you stand out. And the people who you're designing it for would also seek you out. Are like, okay, this is definitely a juice brand for someone like me, or this is a beverage brand for someone like me. And it's just that awareness and that education on how important it is, and that there would always be a way around not having to spend, an arm and a leg, to build your brand from bottom up.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I find that quite insightful. Which will lead me to my next question. I know you had said that strategy found you, but for a young 20-year-old boy or 22-year-old girl watching this right now and wants to be like you, wants to grow up to be a strategy director, what would be your recommendation to them? How do you recommend that they start?
Yeah, I think first is, stay curious, right? I know when I say stay curious, somebody who is probably looking for a job is saying, how is this going to help my life? But your curiosity is also quite powerful, right? Because you're constantly, asking the question why, right? Across board, if even down to when you're trying to get a role and it doesn't go through, you ask yourself why, and you try to fix it. It's when you're walking and you trip and fall, you don't need to bother about where you fell, because it has already happened. It's actually where you slipped, because when you look at where you slipped, you're able to say, okay, if I'm doing this again the next time, how do I do it, right? And so curiosity is one, and secondly, it's also just understanding culture around you, right? Understanding people, having interest in everything, right? Whether it's in music, whether it's film, whether it's entertainment, whether it's the new places in town or the new whatever it's in town. Just understand the world around you, right? And begin to look at what are the patterns that you're noticing, and what does it mean, right? What are people doing? Where are people going? What are people drinking? What are people watching? And what does that mean? Or what expectations are those things beginning to create now for other people or for the same people, right? And then looking at, okay, then how can I create value based on that, right? But beyond the curiosity and beyond also being conversant with popular culture, it's also then looking out for these opportunities, or looking out for opportunities around you, and showing that you can bring that value to the table instantly. Because if you look at the world we live today, with how technology have completely blurred the lines, the amount of people who, in Nigeria alone, we have over 64% internet penetration. You have more and more people getting online because you have more affordable smartphones that exist today. So everybody is adding value in some way or the other. So look out for opportunities and say, how can I add value? What can I bring to the table? And also look out for people who have been in the trade, people who are currently in those types of positions or in those types of organizations that you're looking at, and try to find ways to interact with them, to engage with them, because also today networking has become critical. In fact, I'd say non-conventional skills now more than ever have become very, very crucial to becoming successful or to even starting up, right? Because you can start a conversation, you can have that elevator pitch and say, oh, I understand this, I can actually help you do X, Y, Z. You can do a lot of self-reading yourself. You don't find a lot of young people today read as much. Of course, attention span, it's shrinking by a day. As much as possible, whatever it is that interests you, try to read something about it. Is it culture? Find a book around culture and read it. Is it about consumer behavior? Find a book around consumer behavior and read it. Is it about, strategic planning? Find a book about it and just read about it. And then look for opportunities within that space. I'll tell you a story. There was a time, and this is a long time ago, there's a conference at the time in a hotel. Yeah. And a top guy from some organization at the time was speaking, and after listening to the session, like, oh wow, this is powerful. Then I went on Twitter,
Okay.
at the time X, at the time Twitter. I went on Twitter and I sent him a message like, oh wow, I enjoyed the session. I pointed out something he said that really struck me, and I'm like, oh, which is the best email to reach you? And then he responds and says, oh, great. He sends me his email. This guy was like a sub-Saharan lead or something bigger than I just. Then he sends me his email. Then I of course I send him an email as well. I say, oh, thanks for sending me your email. I really liked, what you're doing and how you're going, how you're going the business across the region. And I'm actually looking for an opportunity to help you build this vision, within this region. I do have a very good understanding of the consumers and in this region. And he responded and connected me to the HR person that was sitting in Dubai. And, the person, reached out to me and invited me for an interview. The only thing was, at the time, the role that was available wasn't a marketing role. So the HR said to me was, okay, this is the role we have available, or whenever we have a role available within this space, we're going to reach out to you, right? So the point I'm making is it really cost me less than 1 gig data, right? But, it's just about, leveraging those non-conventional skills, reaching out, having those conversations, talking about the value that you can add. And people are going to give you opportunities, even if you don't have that experience. The attitude, the passion, the value, the willingness to contribute, add value, would make you attractive, and then you can start building from there.
That's super insightful. Thank you so much for sharing that, because it just speaks to how being intentional and being curious, like you rightly mentioned earlier, just helps you with the right positioning. When you talk about strategy as well, I'd read somewhere where you had talked about it's a yin-yang, situation with creativity and analysis. So what role do you think that creativity, coupled analysis of data, play in ensuring that strategy is watertight?
Yes, I think the beauty is that, like you said, analytics, creativity, right, is really that combination of logic, and magic, as I like to describe it, to create really bold storytelling, right? It's about, because when you look at data knows no emotion. It is what it is. And be able to take that analysis and use that to create something magical, for me, it's really what makes it really powerful, because it's, when you see it, it almost feels like, oh, it's out of nothing, but you can see the value, that it plays in the final output or in the final creative work, because what you've done is you've taken the knowledge of a particular people, a particular culture, a particular business or whatnot, and you've taken that knowledge to create something magical that also solves the problem. It's almost like, whoa, I never saw that coming. So it's, which is why I described it like that. But is that really beautiful combination between logic, and magic, that then helps you tell really bold and really powerful stories that makes it really, really exciting and nerve-wracking as well.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to dial back a little. What was growing up like for you?
Growing up?
Yeah.
Growing up, that's an interesting question. I think growing up was, of course, growing up, you just tried too many things. I've tried. I always make this joke with my friends. I would say, oh, I'm a failed rapper. And at some point, I tried rapping. Okay, it didn't work. I said, okay, maybe I should try DJing. I'm like, okay, maybe I should try something else. It's just been a journey of just experimenting with different things, because when you're young, you have that luxury to just try out things that excite you. You see someone on the screen, like, okay, what would it take to get on the screen? What would it take to to perform in that particular way and things like that. So for me, it was just series of experiences that also allowed me to experiment the different sides of me. I would say it's been an interesting journey so far.
Did you grow up in Lagos, Akwa Ibom? What was it like, when you think about this community, at the time, when you were 10, 15, trying to make sense out of life, what was all of those journey like for you as a person?
Yeah, I think for me is, we grew up in an era where we didn't necessarily have technology the way it is today. I remember then, if your uncle who lives abroad calls, he's going to tell you, oh, I'm going to pause this particular day at this time, and then you wait for that phone to ring, and then you go grab it. And, at that time, like you rightly said, there were a lot of, communities, had family friends, you were in schools where you build relationships with people who were in your school. I have close friends today who I've had ever since I was in nursery school and in primary school, and I've maintained those relationships even up until now. So sort of those communities, just helped you also see life a bit differently, because you're living it, but you're also interacting with people, and you're also seeing the experience, and also seeing how the experiences differ. And what you realize is, as we've also all grown, we've also seen how we also morphed into different people, different personalities, and different careers, different values, or different, charted different courses in life. But I think, that stage also played a very, very, instrumental role, because, you would learn, or I learned life values that I've also, held on to, till today. Those values are really, really important, especially within a community, within a family. In who you are, in how you act, and things you do, how intentional you end up becoming, as well. So I would say it was a lot of community, but that community have also did support me with setting values that I've also taking up even up until this stage.
Beautiful. When you put all of those things together, do you think that your background growing up and all of those things, being curious, for example, you had mentioned that when you see someone on the screen, you wanted to know, how did this person get on the screen? As that, all of those things, when you think about it now, sort of helps you, excel, in your career? Or maybe when you're trying to put together a strategy, for example, those early days, like when you think about it, do they also help in ensuring that, insight is well put together? Or, I just want to know if those things, sort of play a role today in your life.
Yes, it does, because the truth is, when I go out, when I'm sitting in a bar, or when I go to the club, or when I, go to watch a football game, I'm watching the game, but I'm also watching the game through another lens. So what it helps you do is, it helps you really look at life differently, and also look at different things, look at things differently, right? I remember when I was working on a beer brand at the time, and we went to a particular community, and we were trying to crack it, and we said, oh, let's go into this community, let's observe. We went into bars, we sat there, we're drinking with people, we're listening to their conversation, we were watching how they were drinking, what they were mixing, what they were saying, who they were drinking with, trying to really, dig as deep as we could, and even down to the way that they described the beer. And even in that experience, we're able at the time identify a name that was like, boom, it was like, whoa. And when we named it that, it became like, it resonated very strongly, and that's really, why I say that understanding people is really, really key. Even the people who work with me, I always tell you, like, you have to experience whatever it is that you, of course, like, when I say experience, it doesn't mean if it's not a product for men and you're a man, you have to use it. But I'm saying, talk to people who use it, but you have to experience the brands that you're working on. You have to, if you're working for a bank, you have to go into the bank, you have to try and open an account, you have to download the app, you have to see what the experience feels like. You have to go through that journey to understand, okay, what could be the pain points, what could be the barriers that people who are using this are facing, and how can we also navigate and solve that problem, both from a functional point of view, which is get the product to work, but emotional point of view, which is, get the people to feel a certain type of way when they're using the product and the service. So I think that just being somebody who has always been naturally curious, who's always wanted to try something. When I see something, I'm like, okay, I want to go there. I want to know what they're talking about. I want to see what this is about. Has really helped, and it comes naturally. So even when I'm working on a project, I take time out to find the people who use that product. I have conversations across board. I go into the market. I speak to the retailers. I walk on the market. I see the way the product is displayed. I hear the conversation the people are having with the retailers. Putting all of these things together. Of course, with the opportunity on digital as well, you listen and see what are people talking about, what conversations are they having, who is saying what are they saying. By the time you put all of this together and really distill it is mind-blowing, because a lot of times people approach brands with their emotion, how they feel. Oh, this is what you should do. Oh, this is how it should be. No, it's not about you. It may not even be a product that you're supposed to use. Or even the brand owner is saying, oh, this is what I want. But it's not about them. It's about the people who who use the product, the people who buy it, the people who are going to spend their hard-earned money with the shrinking disposable income that we're seeing today to buy it. So you need to understand them. You need to understand how you can play a meaningful role in their life. You need to understand how you can add genuine value to them. You need to find out how you can leave them better off, So dissociating yourself from who the product or the service is meant for, is very key. It's a starting point, because some people think, oh, when you're a strategist, you have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. All you just need to do is to be the person who makes sense of everything, so you're listening, you're a great listener, you're asking questions, you're constantly asking questions, you're picking up things that are said that are not said. What are the codes? What are the, what are people saying? How are they saying it? What is, what are the sentiments that you're picking up? It's about picking all of these things and making sense of it, and then proposing a way forward based on that knowledge. So it's not about trying to be, smart, or trying to use all the big words, or trying to say, oh, this is how sophisticated I think the solution should be. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. Even within my agency, we've provided solutions with generative AI voice solutions in regions where people who are, the women who are in those communities do not have smartphones. And we're thinking, how do we get across to them? And we leverage generative voice AI, to connect with them. So when they dial a code on the feature phones, they're able to listen to the prompt, and they're able to press the code and in different languages, transcripted in different languages, and that is solving a problem, but in a way that is meaningful, because we understand that those people might not be able to understand a certain language. Those people are better off even listening, because when they hear, they understand better. We use that as a solution to deliver that, as a tool to deliver that solution.
Interesting. I like the fact that you also talked about AI now. For what you do, there's the conversation in certain quarters around AI taking people's job, right, for creatives, and even strategy.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think AI is beautiful. It's a beautiful technology. And I think it's here to supercharge the work that we do. Is here to help us work better, work faster, work efficiently, right? It's artificial intelligence. But it also doesn't negate the human intelligence which you have, because you have to feed it for it to support you. In fact, my agency, globally have actually invested so much in AI. So AI is actually part of what we work with on a day-to-day, right? But again, it's a matter of how you use it, or how you use it in a way that it helps you refine your work, it helps you supercharge what you're doing, and it helps you work faster. It's like the assistant that you've always needed that is now there by your side. But remember that the prompts are still important. So what you feed into it, it's authentic, it's original, and then it helps you either make it better or gives you more ideas on how you can make it better. So I think it's the other way around. It's actually going to help people work better, not necessarily taking people's jobs, but it's going to help if people understand how to use it. Because what you find is also there needs to be a lot of education around even how to use it, because people just say, oh, okay, I have AI, and then I just go and put in whatnot there, and then I just take whatever it used to be. No, it has to be contextualized to what you're doing, and you just have to use it in a way that helps you. Everybody is going to use it differently, right? But I think it's a technology, especially within our industry, that is going to help us work better, and also help us even make our work better.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that and creating that context. Are there any challenges, I'm going to ask this question from a place of the market you currently cover, about 25, markets across the continent. What are some of the challenges, that you see, across the continent, especially when it comes to marketing, and communications?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first is data poor, right? It's a data poor region. So there's limited data available in most times, and sometimes that becomes a real challenge. So how do you access real data that you can use to develop the work, or to build whatever it is that you're building, compared to developed markets where it's like there's almost data for everything, right? So that is a big issue. And for the clients who have the investment, some of them invest in that data, or invest in getting data. Some agencies as well, like ours, also make some investment, but I think that is one big challenge that I'd say that the industry is currently facing, especially when you look at even other markets, like when you look at Francophone Africa, for example. Some markets within that region even gets worse. Data is so limited. So it's really about how do we then begin to look at the infrastructure, or the partnerships, or the collaboration that can ensure that we're able to capture valuable data within the region. I think another challenge, and a much challenge that I also see within the region, is also talent. We don't see so much investment in talent. Like you're saying, oh, somebody who wants to do this, what do they need to do? That is a challenge that I see, not just here but also in other markets. And it's really about being deliberate about really mentoring the next generation of talent, and equipping them with the right skills to help them succeed. Because at the end of the day, that investment has to be made, right? I mean, we started something called PWA Academy, Publicity West Africa Academy, and what we're doing with that academy is very new, but it's really a training, a mentorship, a thought leadership platform to really equip both inexperienced and experienced people, with skills, with the right skills, with the right mentorship, to help them excel in the various fields. But again, that's just one thing. But I think that, that is really something that I find, an issue within the industry. Another I would also say is also, I spoke earlier about the one size fits all approach. It's also, nuance messaging as well. I think we're in an era where, yes, in most cases you see that assumption, even sometimes from global brands, and say, okay, this is what we need to do, and they just cascade it down. But the more I work in the different markets, I begin to see that even in Nigeria, we're a nation of so many nations, right? By the time you look at northern Nigeria, you see that it's not even just about transcreating the message. It's about really understanding how different they are and customizing your solution in a way that is really relevant to them and connect with them. And for me, I think that's what we need to begin to do more. Begin to really hyper localize and really drive that relevance. So that in those regions the people can actually say, oh yeah, this is, I understand this brand. This is our brand. They can take ownership of it. So that hyper localization is not quite happening yet. But there's a huge opportunity. There's a huge opportunity there, as well, both within the country and also in other markets as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. You mentioned PWA. For someone watching now wants to take advantage of that, academy, how do they enroll for that?
Yeah, so it's Publicis West Africa Academy. It's there's actually like a link, like an enrollment link where they can sign up.
Okay.
And they can also, of course, stand the chance of being, shortlisted to be part of the academy. But it's really that step to really begin to mentor and train and equip, the next generation of marketing and business people.
Beautiful. So if you're really looking to work within the marketing space, that's a unique opportunity for you. Google PWA, Publicis West Africa Academy, and just enroll, and you might just be one of those that's shortlisted for the program. And wish you the very best on that front. Before we let you go, just have two more questions. The first one is, what's your vision for Africa?
That's a powerful question. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like a president, but but again, I'm really excited, about the continent, how rich the continent is, the richness of the culture, the intelligence of the people, the opportunities, despite, all the challenges the continent faces, you still find that resilience, with our people in not settling for less and trying to make the best out of themselves and trying to become the best versions of themselves. I think that inspires me so much. And for me, especially speaking from a marketing point of view, it's about really, really leveraging data, and technology to build, I'd say, impeccable relationships with people, right? Helping brands build meaningful connections and relevant connections, with their audiences, such that it's a win-win situation. The brand is winning, the people are winning. And from a perspective of young Africans, I think it's just to continue to persevere, Because yes, the opportunities are limited, but there's a lot more that can be done now with platforms like TikTok, with platforms like, I wake up every day. I spend time in most of these channels, and I see that every day there's something new. Somebody's coming up with something. Somebody's coming up with some idea. Somebody's doing something for the first time. There's so much opportunity out there, and it's about really keeping your eyes open and tapping into those opportunities in your own little way. Of course, it will never be that easy or that smooth, but being always informed. The worst mistake you can do in today's world is not to be informed. I always tell people, when you work in advertising, it almost keeps you young, because you're constantly seeing everything happening. You're constantly, in the know. You're constantly informed. But in a continent where the people are able to really make the most of what they have and who they are, and also where brands are able to really, really build meaningful relationships and meaningful connection with their audiences.
Sweet. Thank you so much for sharing that. Before we let you go, for a 20-year-old, again, boy or girl, watching this, what would be your advice to such person? Someone that is 20 years old, not sure where the next meal is going to come from, somewhere across the continent, but still has that drive, as a belief that he or she has a better tomorrow. What would be your advice to such person?
I think the first thing for me would be lifelong learning. Like, you have to constantly keep learning. You have to constantly learn different things, read, like I said earlier, just making learning a habit, making learning a part of you, making learning a part of your life, right? You'd be amazed of how much your life would change even in 6 months of constantly learning. Secondly, I would also say look out for opportunities, right, in the areas of your interests. Now with the way things have changed now, there's so much that you can do, especially when you're starting up. So look out for opportunities. What are the areas that you're interested in? Seek out opportunities within those areas. Reach out to people who are already in those spaces. Have conversations with people who are already in those spaces. Find out how you can get into those spaces. Do the things that they advise you, or the things that they say to you that might help you get opportunities in those spaces. And then things that you can also do on your own. Also start doing that. On your own as well. So being adaptable as well. Being able to adapt to different situations and open-minded. To whatever it is that you feel that you can do, and starting from there. The key is starting somewhere. It's starting somewhere, and you never can tell. You never get it figured out at the beginning. There's never that perfect opportunity, or of course in some cases maybe, but it's always about learning, looking out for opportunities, going for those opportunities, and also having a growth mindset. Having a mindset of improving yourself and seeing problems as an opportunity. Sometimes people get opportunities, and when there's a problem, it's like, oh, I don't know what to do. No, but look at that problem as an opportunity. How can you resolve it? Because if that problem didn't need to be solved, you probably wouldn't have been called into that situation. So always looking at that, looking at problems from that point of view, and then keep improving yourself, and also keep looking out for mentorship opportunities. Seek out mentors, seek out a network. I always tell a lot of young people around me, build a community, a support system around you. Your peers, people who might be senior in your space, mentors that you constantly have conversations with, you constantly bounce off ideas with, you constantly share, whatever it is you need to share. If you're looking for an opportunity or if you're looking for something, at least you have that community where you can share that. Communities are super powerful. You're probably 2 or 3 persons away from, one amazing opportunity. So really being deliberate about your life, it's very crucial now. Being very deliberate. What do I want to do? What do I need to do to get there? And then taking those steps, gradually, and over time, you get there.
Beautiful. Emeka, I want to say a very big thank you to you for the gems, and the insights you shared with us. It's been amazing learning from you. And I'm sure our audience also must have learned as well from all you've had to share with us today. I want to say a very big thank you again to you, and I wish you very best, in your endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.